I'm Coach Bob Boen, and I'm Rockin Wit McGriff.
The block hot, the block hot, the block hot, the block hot. Hey, hey, I got the block hot.
Yeah, it's kind of dark here. I'll open the volume or something here. Just tracing those guys the year after you. That's the year after you guys. Tracing Julian and say Bob. Well, I grew up in Minnesota till I was 8 years old, and then my family moved to Brockton, and since fourth grade I've lived in Brockton. I was popular because I played a lot of sports. Kids who play sports have a lot of friends usually. So yes, I was a pretty popular kid, I would say.
11-point game. This is fun. Listen.
I've been coaching basketball 35 years at Brockton. Was JV coach for 23 years, and now I just finished my 12th year as varsity coach. So 35 years at Brockton High School I've been coaching. Yeah, these are our holiday championship trophies we've got here. Keep those in here. The Brockton trophy case is too full, so we've got to keep those in our locker here. Probably like 2012 through 2000, last year. Getting harder and harder even to get us games. And as I say, we had to fold that holiday tournament up 2 years ago because we couldn't get teams to come and play in it. The first time I really tried out for a basketball team would have been in junior high school in Brockton. Tried out for the North junior high school team, and they had run a program for 5th and 6th graders at North Junior High School. So the coach kind of knew me because it was a recreation program, and I was a very skilled player, as my dad was a basketball coach, so I was a very skilled player even at a young age. Well, we've got what we've always had. This has been our practice jersey for, the black on the one side, the red and white on the other. It's been our practice jersey for all 36 years I've been here. Same jersey, same, going over to Piesco Sports to get it. So, I don't know, somebody might have one of these from 36 years ago they put away in their closet, which is pretty good to think about. My first coach was Don Vanderstreet, who was the coach at North Junior High School. He was a big, strong man, and he had been a good basketball player up at Dartmouth College, and he knew a great deal about basketball. My position was to play sort of the point guard. He played a 3 guards, 2 forward offense. I played the middle, bringing the ball up court, but it was mainly to pass the ball to the other 2 players who were quite a bit better than me. They were strong and very good scorers. So yeah, I played point guard, but the point guard position for him was mostly to pass the ball off to the scorer. Well, I loved basketball very early. My father was a basketball coach, and back in Minnesota I can remember, and I look back on this and I can't imagine how I did it. I was incredibly young, of course, but somehow I was like 6 or 7 years old, and I was already keeping the scorebook for his basketball teams. So we were always at basketball practice or coming or going, and then of course we'd play basketball around the neighborhood every chance we got. So my love of basketball was from a very, very early age. Tennis now, they got the tennis stuff up there. We always have our schedule, and then I always have clippings and inspirational things. I've last few years had the picture of the Olympic team when they came back, because the title of the article is "Playing as a Team." They brought back and that's got. And then I've got always some stories about basketball players and whenever there's a clipping from one of our guys who's in college, we put it up on the boards there. I would say my biggest lessons were lessons about how to play defense. I wasn't a particularly quick player, and I wasn't a particularly strong player. Learning the idea that you want to get to somebody's strong hand and keep them off their strong hand. As I say, when I played middle school, I played with two outstanding players. They were big and strong and good scorers, so sometimes in practice you'd get matched up on them and it would be very difficult to cover them and stop them. So getting them off of their strong hand was a lesson that I learned early in life.
I do think English will come up the North Shore, D1. But this year, Lynn is stacked. They're stacked. English and St. Mary's, they're stacked. They're loaded. .44-54, 10-point game. Boxing's down with 2 minutes left in the third quarter. Off the glass and in.
Yeah, Biddle's really balling today. Biddle's really balling today.
Here comes that boxer press right here. It causes so many turnovers. They had Saquon there open in the paint, and they missed him.
Nice play by Damian Blakely. Take one for the team.
The difference between basketball then and now, the biggest difference I would say is the three-point line. Back then, of course, there was no three-point line in the game. The main idea of the game was to get the ball in close for a good, easy basket, or maybe get a shot about the foul line. Nobody shot shots that were more than 15 feet from the basket back then. The other thing would be players now are probably more athletic. Back then, if you had somebody on the team that was dunking a basketball, it was a pretty amazing thing. Even in the high school, there were very few players who were dunking basketballs. Now, almost the whole team can dunk a basketball. But right now, the locker room's probably pretty empty. Tennis, I don't know if they use it even. I think they come in and they go right out onto the tennis court. So this is our locker room here with varsity, JV, freshmen. That's the way we run it here. Gotta get to the big time, get over to the varsity side, make it over to the varsity side. That's the way we work it. Freshmen start way over in the corner there and get into the JV, a little more space, and then the varsity's the good space. You know, it's a funny thing. I don't think I ever did think of that much as a young player, although I did a lot of coaching on the court, and I was always one of the players who understood what we tried to accomplish. I don't think I really saw myself coaching all the time. But it's very much a natural thing after you become a player, if you like the thinking aspects of the game, to become a coach. I started coaching BHS Brockton High School basketball in 1983. I'd coached in the church leagues of Brockton almost immediately after getting out of college. I'd been away at the University of Massachusetts at college, so I couldn't coach then. But as soon as I got back from college, I started coaching the church leagues of Brockton. And I'd coached about 5-6 years of church leagues. And then I started in 1983 at Brockton High School. Good access to our whiteboard where we've gone over things for years and years. Many plays drawn up on that whiteboard. Many strategies planned on that whiteboard. Yes, that was the second year I had coached. I was JV coach with the championship team of 1984, 1985. And a lot of those guys, well, some of those guys had played JVs for me. Most of them had been 2-year varsity players on that team.
Hey, Odell. Commercial from Mr. Oldstall here? Full commercial? Pepsi Light or what? Danny. What? You drive like you play the outfield. Forget it.
July 28th, 1985.
We're Mr. Shelby. We're going to do it in 5 years again. Yeah, thanks, Joe. Dick, 5 years from now, this is the only championship you're going to get, so you better... The only championship. You know something, Odell? just in spite of you, we may win it next year, right? Hey. I don't know. Roof is here. Roof is. We already got somebody. Orlando said he can replace you already.
Well, that year's a year that will always stick out, of course. As I've learned how hard it is to win a state championship, it probably sticks out even more.
Oh, I can even do that.
No, you want to say you took a good shot. I'll show you. All the perfect form, Curtis. Oh yeah.
Just like everybody gets.
They got playing, right? The Bowen team, they got it made. All the referees are welcome. There you go. It's not bad. No.
So us white guys can dunk it.
How you want to kill them? Here you go. Downtown Curtis. Not soft. That would be a good picture for Mr. Olson. No, there you go, Mr. Olson. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Real Hollywood. Not easy. That's where I want to go. Oh, should have felt right.
You guys are showing me stuff that I can do.
I remember the players a lot because my brother happened to be one of the players. My brother was one of the captains on that team, along with Odell Wilson, and Odell Wilson was my brother's best friend. So I knew them very well. My brother was a tremendous scoring guard, a tremendous passer. Odell was a tremendous defensive player, but Odell had given up his scoring. Odell was a junior high legend. He had scored 50 points in a game a couple times in junior high, came to Brockton High, and he gave up his scoring role. He did average 9-10 points a game, but he played the point guard. He was the guard who brought the ball up court, distributed it, and usually covered the other team's toughest player. We also had one of the best forward centers we've ever had, Michael Shelby. Michael was one of the first ones that really showed me what a tremendous dunker. We had a backdoor play where my brother threw a lob up to Michael and he slammed it down. Michael was a tremendous center. He and my brother were the two high scorers on the team. We also had a big center, 6'9" center, Curtis Jackson, that went off to play at DePaul. And we had a fifth forward who was a very good role player, Danny Anglin. And we had guard Ernie Bell coming off the bench. And we had a young sophomore, Orlando Vandross, coming off the bench. Orlando coaches at the University of Virginia now. And he was a sophomore. Turned out to be a tremendous player the next 2 years when most of those seniors graduated. But yeah, I remember our state championship team very well. It was just a super talented bunch. And you can see why they won the state championship. You know, it's funny you say that because about a month ago I was thinking, I always warm up on this one, I always shoot on this one. I don't know why. But as varsity coach, I've always practiced on this one with the JVs down the other end. But whenever I warm up to play, I shoot at this one. The state championship game was a real kind of letdown game. Fitchburg had come here to Brockton High and we had beaten them by about 25 points. We also in the state semifinals had a huge game against our biggest rival, Cambridge Ridge and Latin. We had split with Cambridge Ridge and Latin in the regular season and we ended up winning the game against them at UMass Boston on a buzzer beater to win the Eastern Mass. So that was a very fired up game for that. So the state championship against Fitchburg was a real letdown because we thought we were going to win very easily. We didn't play particularly well, we didn't play particularly fired up, and it ended up being, I think we ended up winning by 6. It ended up being a real struggle, that state championship game. Yeah, my first year was, as I said, 1983. I remember being amazed at how talented my JVs were. I had a player, Reuben McGee, and Reuben, you know, could jump and dunk and run and very athletic. And I remember I went home from practice that first day and I said, wow, these kids are going to be unbelievably good. Because Reuben was a real talented, he was our captain 2 years later. He was a very talented player as a sophomore. And I said, this is amazing. And I had a very good team that year. I think we were about 16-4. But not one of my great JV teams, as it turned out. I thought they were great players, but as the years went on, I went on and saw that that wasn't one of my strongest JV teams. And of course, the varsity that year was the state championship team as juniors, and they surprised me because I wasn't sure. I didn't realize how good we were then. We almost won the South Sectional then. We lost a tough game to Durfee. I believe we lost by 2, as those guys were juniors. Looking back, maybe I should have expected more that year. But yeah, that was my first year, and I remember that team very well.
Keeping score at home. 0 for 5 beyond the arc is Azor gets past Chebo.
Nice job by Azor. Yes, yes. He went right around the screen right there. Defensive player thought he might run into him for the charge, but Azor nicely went around it and made the tough shot underneath the basket.
Timeout Quincy with 3:27 to go in the first quarter. It's 11-3. Miles, Quincy's 0 for 5 beyond the arc, but they're still hawking them.
Our biggest obstacle as a coach has always been here at Brockton High that it's such a big place. Some of our very good players get lost. I could go through a list through the 35 years of coaching of 35 players who are absolutely super players that just never made it through 4 years of varsity, 4 years of ball at Brockton High, and never turned out to be the great player that we thought they were going to be coming in. It's a difficult place for a lot of students. It's so big. A lot of our basketball players get lost in the crowd here and don't succeed academically the way we'd like. And some don't succeed basketball-wise like we'd like. They never really get the dedication and put in the effort that they should. Well, I study, there are a lot of coaches that I study. I do try to watch all the interviews they have on TV. Coaches like Mike Krzyzewski just knows so much about basketball and has had such great success with his teams through the years. Brad Stevens, before he came to the Celtics, just an amazing college coach, and I believe an amazing NBA coach, even though I'm not a big fan of the NBA. I do think he does some great things. So I study all of those college coaches that have been successful and try to get a little bit from them. And there are many, many high school coaches that are very good coaches. Coach Vaughn over at Mansfield, the coach over at Newton, Coach Doughton at Cambridge Ringe and Latin. They do things that are very impressive. 3 players who changed my coaching style. I would start off with the first year that I coached varsity basketball here. I had Kyle Geary. Kyle was a tremendous shooter, tremendous scorer. He changed my style a little bit to say, okay, you're a good scorer, just take the ball and score. He opened me up to a little bit more freedom. I would say that I've had a lot of very good defensive players. at guard positions. Starting again on that first varsity team I had Kendall Gillians was a tremendous player. Followed that up maybe the next year with someone like Henry Vargas was a tremendous defensive player. And going right through the years, this year I had two good guards, Todd Robinson and Diamond Blakely, very tough defensive players. I've learned that with players that we have at Brockton High, you were able to get right up in the face of ball handlers and play them very, very tough. So I think that's something that I learned, that if you have talent like we have, you can play right up in the face of people and force them to make mistakes. Last, I would say, just in general, our Brockton High players have taught me that shooting that three-point shot is a good shot. I was a coach who liked it almost immediately. I can remember my first year, I had some great three-point shooters. I had Alex Janaris and Mark Pileski and Mark Hartzell. And then I go right down to the years that I had our great success there with you guys. Kyle Geary was a very good shooter. Timmy Young, you were a very good shooter. Henry Vargas, Sean Yard, excellent shooters. Gerard Devon, Louis Mons, that team that was 23-1, we had probably 5 people who were very good three-point shooters. The starting five, plus a couple guys who came off the bench who were good shooters. So I think through seeing all of our good shooters we've had, I've learned that, yes, the three-point shot is a very good shot, and it's the new game that everybody's kind of learned now. That's something I think about all the time. Well, I've had a lot of people do things that have taught me things as a coach. As a JV coach, my first year I had a player named Curtis Mahones. Curtis was very raw talent. He hadn't really played on teams a lot. He could jump and he could shoot, and a little bit not quite disciplined the way we'd like him to be disciplined. Very nice kid though. Curtis, unfortunately, after his sophomore year he played for me, junior year he was hurt and didn't come out, and it turned out he was hurt because he had cancer in his leg. And Curtis, the next year, had to lose his leg because of cancer. And Coach Ortiz very nicely took Curtis in and let Curtis live with him for a while, because besides having cancer, he also, sometimes Curtis had trouble behaving the way his mother wanted him to. So that taught me a lot. Another time I can remember in practice, one of my favorite players, Henry Vargas, I yelled at Henry to start working harder on our zigzag drill or else just go home. And Henry said, "Okay, I quit." And he walked away. This was like the third week of practice. And before I even got home, Henry had called me and said, "Coach, I'm sorry. I had just broken up with my girlfriend that day, and I didn't really I never wanted to quit the basketball team," because Henry absolutely loved basketball and he loved being part of the team. So I learned there that sometimes you got to be careful. You got to think about what might be going on before you are very tough with somebody or very stern with somebody, that there's probably some reason somebody who's usually a great kid for you and a hard worker for you isn't doing what he's supposed to do. So I learned that. I also learned that for some kids, it's very hard to get to practice. I've almost always, as the coach, had to drive some people home and sometimes pick them up for Saturday practice. At Brockton High, we have a lot of guys that don't have a ready ride to practice, that are working very hard to get themselves to practice. So it's a fine line I tread between discipline, get yourself to practice on time, especially on the weekends and school vacation, and, okay, I get it, you don't have a ride home, you don't have someone to drop you off at practice. Here at Brockton High, that is kind of a huge problem, getting to practice.
I'm number 22 if you know.
Wait, I don't see it because I
I'm not a basketball player.
I don't care. Look at 8 seconds left. Who gets the ball? Hold on.
Look how it gets the winning shot. I was like, damn, homie. That high school is good.
Yo, I'm videotaping. 3, 2.
That was you?
Yeah. All from Brockton. Basically, everybody was from
Who's
Brockton.
that guy that picture up?
Oh, that's the. I'll tell you after. Nah, I don't know who this was.
Toughness is something that, again, I would go back to way back when I was young and a skinny junior high player. I learned that you better be tough or people are going to take advantage of you. There is the physical toughness, the going to get a loose ball and being sure the loose balls are ours, the boxing out on a rebound toughness. But there's also the mental toughness. There are certain guys who've played for us that are very mentally tough. I'd go back to someone like Kyle Geary. Kyle Geary wanted that ball at the end of the game. You've got to have guys who want the ball, who want to make that last play for you, those last couple plays. You sometimes find out that somebody who's a great scorer, a great shooter for you, doesn't really want that last shot. He would prefer that somebody else on the team take that last shot. You've got to be tough if somebody steals the ball from you. You've got to be ready to come back and make that next play. You've got to be able to wipe that off your mind and be ready to make that next play. You got to be the guy who wants to make 2 foul shots late in the game when the crowd is cheering at you. You got to be the tough guy during those tournament games when the other fans are making fun of you and jeering you, that they don't bother you. You like that. You enjoy that atmosphere. So toughness has 2 parts. You got to be physically tough, but probably more important, you've got to be mentally tough when you play in the big games in high school. Interesting you say that, interestingly enjoy coaching, because I would say every year I've enjoyed coaching. It's always exciting. The players, the kids are always interesting. There's always some stories. There's always guys that you just love having play for you. As a varsity coach, I would say my first year, of course, was terribly exciting being a varsity coach. And we had a tremendously talented team. I think if that was my 12th or 13th year as coach, we would have won the state championship. I think as my first year varsity coach, I wasn't ready for how good we really were. Of course, my second year when we were 23-1, that was a tremendously exciting time. And a lot of the players from the year before, being 23-0 and losing at the Boston Garden in overtime, that was a great year. The year we went to the state championship out in Springfield, William Baker and that group, they were a very, very talented group and a lot of personality on that group. That group was one that I said, you guys miss so many practice and come late to so many practice, we're going to win the state championship. The first thing I'm going to say at the interview is, no, this was a terrible team for practice. They did not work as hard as they should have and turn out to be as good a team as they should have. A great bunch of kids, but 2 or 3 on that team that weren't dedicated to the idea that getting to practice is what makes us better. So I love that team. Almost, as I say, every year it's been a good year, but those first 2 or 3, probably my third year was one of my favorite teams, because we graduated that 23-1 team. We graduated, I believe it was 10 seniors that year, which is by far the most I've ever kept, the most we've ever had at Brockton High. I had almost nothing coming back that year. I had 2 guards and 1 forward, and I always say Leo Medina would be my favorite player forever because Leo kept that team together. I thought coming into that, I remember when we lost at Boston Garden, somebody interviewed me on the way out.
We were tired, and they did make some good plays. They made a couple of good plays in a row. And I forget how they got a 4-point lead on us. I remember they made a good basket, and we must have turned it off.
And they said, tough loss, coach, but you got to be looking forward next year. And I said, I don't know what we'll do next year. I've got nothing coming back. And turned out Leo kind of took that team of juniors and he made them a very good team. We lost in the South Sectional finals that year in overtime. And I always say Leo's probably my favorite all-time player because he took a team that I thought we were going to get killed that next year with our Brockton High schedule and turned us into, I think we were 10-1 at one point. We played the Lynn English team that had beaten us at the Garden. They came in with 2 huge forwards, and the whole state thought they were destined to be state champions. They came in here to Brockton High, and they got ahead of us like 10-11 to nothing. Their big forwards had come down and thrown a couple dunks on us, but we turned the game around and we ended up beating them here. And Leo turned that season around. I think we ended up 23-4 that year from a team that I thought was just going to get pounded all year.
Don't bring it in here. I know. Oh, yeah. There you go, you know, so just not sure. Not saying he's not good. I just don't know if he's that good.
I'm just going to take my head coaching years because there are too many players. I always look at this when they say dream team and best player ever in NBA or some college thing, and it's just hard. There are just so many good players. Probably for here at Brockton High, I would certainly start with Kyle Geary because he was my first real star that year. Then you'd have to look at the next team that had Louis Montz and Gerard Devon, who were 3-year starters. Louis Montz went on to be a Division I player, and Gerard Devon a 1,000-point scorer at Division III. They were super players. The next year, as I say, Leo Medina, for his toughness, would just have to be on my list, the way he carried us that year. I would go into Savon Houston. Savon Houston on that team that went to the state finals as a center was probably one of our all-time great centers. Throwing the ball into him on the block, he was just a fantastic player. Savon Houston would be on the list of all-time players. It's very tough because at Brockton they're just so many good players. After that, guys like William Baker. William was another one that toughness came out. He kind of took that team and brought us onto that state championship. He wasn't the high scorer, but he was the ball handler and the toughest defender. So I would include William Baker on that team. This is a very tough one. I wish I had all my scorebooks to remember all my players. Yeah, I would say in the years after, of course, the DeVivier brothers, Garrison and Jonathan. Jonathan actually became our second 1,000-point scorer in Brockton High history, which doesn't happen because usually sophomores don't play for us. Our teams are too strong to have sophomores playing varsity. Jonathan happened to be a year that our seniors weren't real strong, so Jonathan got to play quite a bit and averaged about 12 points a game as a sophomore. So he did become a 1,000-point scorer. Jonathan and Garrison certainly outstanding players. These last couple years we've had again very good players. I would say I'm hopeful that Navon, who's playing for us right now, will become one of our all-time great players. He actually played varsity as a freshman, which is sort of unheard of. The only other persons I can think of doing that were Curtis Bostic, who went on to be probably our greatest athlete ever. Curtis went on to play at the University of Cincinnati, played at the Boston Shootout, won the dunk contest as the Boston Shootout. He played as a freshman. And Michael Robinson played as a freshman. Michael, of course, only played 1 year with us, and then he went off to prep school. Michael Robinson would have been one of the all-time great Brockton players if he had stayed at Brockton High School. So, you know, naming an all-time team is just impossible, and I'm sure whatever all-time team we named, somebody else could come up with a second all-time team that could beat that team. Just in my 12 years, there are just so many players that have been fantastic, all-scholastic players. I don't know it exactly. I'm getting close to 200 wins is why I do know it. I thought I might get it this year, the 200th win. This year's record was disappointing to us. We ended up 12-9. I thought we were going to be better. We had a young and inexperienced team, and we never really gelled into a team that could finish at the end of the games real well. All of my coaching record right now, varsity is about 195 and 80, I think. JVs was up around, I think 375 and maybe 100 losses. So I've lost a lot of games here at Brockton High, but fortunately I've won about 3 times as many games as I've lost. It's a wonderful place to coach that way. Only had 1 losing season, which was a shock to us. It's the great thing about Brockton High. I've never gone to a game thinking we were going to lose. And I look at some other teams and I think they must come into Brockton High knowing there's no way they're going to beat us tonight. But I've never ever gone to a game. Even our 1 losing season, we lost a lot of close games. I always thought we were going to win every night that year. You know, I'm the kind of guy that fun is so much sports. Fun for me is usually going to a game, baseball, basketball game. Fun is being with my family. I have a very large family. I'm the oldest of 9 children. I have 18 nieces and nephews, so we do a lot of family things. There's always somebody's birthday coming up or some holiday coming up that we're getting together. Those are the main things I do for fun. The one thing that people are sometimes surprised, I like to go to Las Vegas every summer and gamble for fun. But I'm always very careful on that. I always warn people, don't worry, I'm only gambling away money that I have extra money to lose. But I would say most of my fun is sporting and athletic events and family events. Well, every Sunday at Brockton High, we come and we play basketball. We've been doing it at Brockton High for 15 years now. Before that, we used to do it over at Stonehill College. So since I got out of college, which is now 40 years ago, we've played basketball on Sunday mornings. About 15 years ago, I opened it up here at Brockton High, and now we get many more of my own Brockton High players and many more Brockton High people come, which is great. I love playing with the guys, and I'm hanging on here. I'm just about at the end of my basketball playing career, I'm afraid. It's impossible for me to cover a lot of the players now and just keep up. Luckily, they're not all in top shape anymore. I'd never be able to play with them. So we open up, we play a couple, 2-3 hours every Sunday morning. It's great for the guys to get back together. And we've got a lot of guys now that somebody brought a friend and somebody else brought a friend and somebody else brought a friend. I always say someday all the guys that have played in the years will show up on a Sunday morning and we'll end up with 200-300 people here looking to play basketball, because there are a lot of people that show up maybe 10 times a year out of the 52 weeks. There are guys who show up 2-3 times. There are guys who have been lost for 7-8 years. We haven't seen them and will suddenly show up again. So it's a wonderful connection for me to my old players. and it's fun, still a lot of fun to play. Young players growing up right now, and I say this to them all the time, don't get too big ahead when people tell you how good you are. No matter how good you are, there are guys who are better than you. No matter how fast you are, how high you can jump, there's somebody around who can jump higher and is faster than you. Keep working at it. Don't ever be lazy and take it for granted how good you are. Don't ever coast because you're a good player. There are going to be people better than you. For all my years, I've seen so many kids in those youth leagues who think they were great players and going to be great players, and they get bad habits and bad attitudes, and sure enough, by the time they get to high school, somebody else is better than them. Somebody has passed them by. So I always would say, don't get too big ahead, stay humble, and work hard.
Telling me that. Telling me to make a big trade this summer. Why?
Okay, I would like to thank all the guys who have played for me because they've worked hard for me. And there have been some times that I've probably yelled at them and not been the most pleasant person around. So all the players who put in the effort for me, who made it to practice on all those weekends and got to practice every day. And really, a lot of my players had to give up themselves for the team. I'm a coach who plays a lot of players. I usually play 8, 9, 10 players, but even then that means some guys don't get many minutes. And people have had to give of themselves to be a part of our Brockton High team. I thank all of those. I've also been very, very lucky to have a great assistant coaches. Guys who worked hard, guys who gave of themselves, guys who thought of the Brockton High team as the most important thing in their lives. I've had Chris Sullivan, Mike Bolger, Nick Lee. Right now I've got Kevin Rooney and Manny DeBarros, two people who put in their time, and none of them have ever expected any credit. They've always just done it because it's Brockton High. So a lot of people to thank, and it's been a great place to coach and great people to work with. So this is Coach Bob Boen, Rockin Wit McGriff.
That's why he's not here right now. He's probably still faded. Hey, light.
Did you win it yet? He'll like stop, like he's not gonna move, and all of a sudden
I got the East.
and you're like,
I don't know if it's a national award or not.
We can stuff the ballot boxes. Bring it on! Many moves? Yeah. Whoa! Watch it behind you. Get too many of those. Get too many of those.
Man, we've been doing this for years now. Probably 5-6 years. Man, we don't let him score. We don't let him score, man. He does his thing. He does his thing out there. So I don't know, man. He's been amazing, man. Really one of the best coaches I've ever had. He's definitely taught us a lot of lessons, you know, in life. And he genuinely cares about the kids, you know. So it's great that he's still with the program, and you know, I congratulate him to the award that he won. That's really great recognition for the program and for the work that he puts in.
Yeah, Coach Boen, man. Great coach. Very dedicated to developing players on and off the court. You know, since I've been in Brockton High, always been looked up to. Great man. Opening the gym for the alumni on Sundays. Get this run in. Great man. Very, very respectful. Always tip my hat off to him. Hey, as soon as you meet him, you gotta love him. Always gotta love him.
Attack that! Give it a shot, give it a shot. Box up. Coach Boen pretty much means everything to me. I mean, I moved here in '92. Never played basketball before. I got introduced to basketball. He was one of my first real coaches. Taught me everything I know about basketball, about life, about growing up and being an adult. And I'm just happy that I get the chance to work with him in the high school team. It's just a great privilege to be around him. You know, as long as he's here, I'm going to keep my head in the door and try to help out as much as I can, and hopefully he'll have me keep coming back. But he's a great man and a great coach, and Brockton High's been lucky to have him all these years. Just hope he keeps going.